Good morning. It's Ariana Brackenbury with Mary Magdalene Pilgrimages, and I'm here with my co-host, Jenny Griffin. Today, we are both really excited and honored to bring to you the very first of the Mary Magdalene Sessions, which is a frank and honest conversation about the energy of the divine feminine. Today, our topic is courage, belonging, and surrender, navigating fear and sharing your truth from a place of vulnerability. In order to set the energy for today, we've pulled a card that sets the intention. Awakening. You are going through a period of awakening. Things are changing within you and at many levels. You are starting to remember ancient truths and discovering more and more about who you are and why you incarnated. You may find that you are experiencing past life flashbacks, seeing the invisible thread that is woven through all of life, or even feeling Kundalini Shakti rise through your body from the base of your spine. The most important thing for this time is not to overthink it and to stay grounded. Share your experiences with like soul people while you consciously integrate them, journal, and pay attention to your dreams. You are remembering and your soul gifts are emerging. During this time of transition and awakening, you may be called to devote yourself to being of service. There are ideas, concepts, books, and creations waiting to be birthed into this world. Stay open to receiving them. Pulling this card may be a sign that you are here to birth one of those creations into the world. Or perhaps you are being called to make a shift in your life in order to be of service. Don't think too much about it. Instead, repeat the following Work Your Light activation. I surrender to my awakening. I allow the Shakti energy to rise from the base of my spine. I open myself up to the universe using me in a way that delights my mind, body, and spirit. I'm going to pass over to Jenny right now so she can further bring in the energy that we're manifesting for this particular session.
Hello, Ariana, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think to start, let's just take 3 deep breaths together and tap in to our heart space and feel into what courage means to each of us individually. And as you breathe out, release definitions of courage that may not serve you or may not feel resonant with you. As we have been shifting into a more feminine way of being, certain definitions that were created under the sort of patriarchal structures have come to define the way that we show up in the world, or even the way that we feel about certain energies. And I think courage is one of those. And some of these collectively held beliefs, some of these collectively held definitions have kept many of us from honoring a deeper truth. And that is the courage in the small moments that we might forget to honor, or the courage in the things that that we've been taught are not courageous, like feeling deeply, the courage to make choices that are unpopular in the world, the courage to, or in your family, the courage to show up even when you're not feeling your best, or even when you feel like you have failed in some way. So to release the ideas of courage that are connected to that sort of dominant strength or hiding your vulnerability. And also, there's something else that feels really key at the moment. I'm house sitting this little cat who has 3 legs, because she was in an accident where she lost one of her legs. And some people might say it's courageous of her to continue, but how do we know that this is not who she came here to be? So the courage for her might not lie in that. And that's where we can undo the ideas of courage. And again, just keep defining it for yourself from your own heart. How am I courageous? Only you can define that for you. So I think that's what's coming through right now. I hope that's something to work with.
I think so. And I think what's fascinating for me is looking at all the times in my life. I've had people say, you're amazingly courageous. And there's times when it feels like I've been courageous, and there's times that other people look at me as being courageous, but it doesn't feel courageous for me in that moment. So each person has their own definition of courage. And I think what happens for us often is when we see someone doing something that would be scary for us, we would call that courageous.
Exactly.
And yet when we're doing it for ourselves, it's not always the same thing. So what courage is for one person is very different.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I think we can sometimes overlook how courageous we have been, because it's something in our life that we can easily normalize, right? So the choices that we make that other people see as courageous for us is normal, so we don't see it as courageous. So in order to honor your courage, you actually have to get deep inside and realize that there are places where you've been courageous that you might not have recognized in the past, because either it didn't align with someone else's belief, or because to you it felt so normal.
I think
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think I'm looking back over my life at some of the things that I've done that other people think are courageous, like getting on a train at 19 and traveling to Ontario with $40 and not knowing where I was going. Now that to me was adventure, and not courage. It was just like an adventure. One of the times when I did do something, I think starting a new business was courageous, and putting it out there that I knew how to program before I knew how to program, that was courageous. And then taking a big job with the city of Medicine Hat saying, oh yeah, I know how to do that. And then figuring it out on the way. When we're on our journeys, we're going to be called to do things. Even this particular webinar is courageous for me because it's the first time I've done anything like this. And
same here.
I think it's just, there's those natural, just crunchiness that comes up when we're heading into something that's not where we feel really grounded and comfortable, and we can just pull it off simply and easily because we've done it before. And I think what we're being called to on the planet, as Mary Magdalene is calling in the energy right now, we all are called to places. Now I'm feeling that deep energy. We're called to stand up more fiercely. Like, what is that like for you, Jenny? Like for me, it's like being seen, and we're talking about belonging, right?
Yeah.
And where do I belong on the planet? And who have I allowed myself to be? And if I've been pretending to be kind of somebody that kind of fits into things, but I'm feeling I'm being called to something much deeper in a way, in an area that I've been avoiding.
Yeah. Yeah. I can completely relate to that. And I think there was something that came up earlier today, which made a lot of sense for me. Belonging is one of my hugest, not blocks, but one of my hugest wounds in this lifetime. I know that for sure. And then something that came up this afternoon when I was feeling into this, this topic is, what if we're not here to belong? And that takes courage. It takes huge courage not to belong. And that's the whole point. And actually, there's a big shiver there. That is what Mary Magdalene is calling us to. And that's where the ferocity comes in, is like the courage to not belong. That is like a huge, we're not supposed to follow the path that other people follow. because this is a new place that we're going. This is a place that has not been seen on this planet for millennia. This, the way the energy is rebalancing, and the way that the feminine is showing up and asking us to change the way that we are, the way that we interact with the world. It's new. And so in order to create something new, you have to be courageous enough to not allow the old to define you, to not allow the old to hold you back. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, oh my goodness, my brain is kind of popping here and there with ideas and thoughts around that. It's, I think I have a coach, Jennifer Huff, who talks about being a member of the Not Belonging Club. And my sense is who I am in my family has been always kind of an outsider, but only when I can feel that energy, only in my own head. And like, sort of like the blue sheep of the family, I prefer blue to black, but it's just like, I never really kind of fit into the family thing. I never had children and all these things. That it was always this sense of, not that I ever was made to feel not invited or not part of that family unit, but my life that I chose ended up being living in different cities, never living in the same place as my family. And so I don't have the same level of them knowing the truth of who I am, or the essence, I would say the essence. And often, so that's in the family unit where people don't belong. And we often come into families, I think, that are they're here to teach us.
Yeah.
I was very blessed that my family actually is very balanced, and it's not there's not a lot of lessons from anger and things like that. But for other people, family is a big teacher, and it's just, maybe we don't feel like we belong because they're so different than how we perceive ourselves as being.
Yeah. And also, like, we have to understand that ideas that seem to be concepts that seem to be true are not always true. They're just collectively held beliefs and structures that have kept us safe from expanding beyond a certain point, energetically, spiritually. So when we think about the way that the collective is set up, or when you hear in the media, you hear all around the idea of family as this sacred unit, like, nothing is closer than family if it's where you belong. But that is not true for everyone. And it's hard then. It's especially hard for people who have that experience of not really feeling like they belong in their family unit. How do you then connect with other people when that is their sense of belonging? But the whole point is that just because it's a collectively held belief does not mean that it is the truth, because there is no one truth, right? Everyone's truth is what's the word? Not relevant. Well, subjective, I guess, but it's for them alone.
Right.
So, and this is where, and like you say, it's the whole idea of, like, do you truly not belong, or do you just feel you don't belong? And maybe the sense of not belonging is what causes you to burst beyond the boundaries or limitations of what your family or town or country thought was possible. It's maybe that sense of not belonging that causes you to seek something more. So it's not good or bad. It is just what it is.
Well, and it is interesting because we have part of the topic today was surrender as well. And for me, it's, there's such a mass consciousness around belonging.
Mm-hmm.
People, that have been divorced and they don't feel they belong anymore with the old friends, or people that don't feel like they belong in their family, or they don't belong at work. They're kind of like, who are these people around me? And why am I in this work environment with these, I won't use the term that first came to mind there, but it's can we surrender into the fact that we don't all have to be the same? It's part of that breaking down the paradigms. If we can surrender into just the truth of who we are and know that in our tribe we belong. So for me, that's what's calling forward right now with Mary Magdalene, is that we're coming into a place where we're called to a bigger tribe. There's a resonance, there's an attractor beam, so to speak, that's actually calling us together. And even Jenny, you and I, how we met, and it just like, at first we were on a different trajectory. We had met talking about a specific thing, and all of a sudden it evolved into this amazing pilgrimage that we've started to create. And so it takes courage for me, like I've done Camino tours, pilgrimages that are normal walking pilgrimages, and they're very structured and it's simple because I've done that already. Yeah. And so for me, when someone channeled for me that she was picking up that it was important for me to do pilgrimages for Mary Magdalene, my first thought was, I don't think so. In my head, it was like, I have this, I had the face on that was kind of
skeptic.
Not the skeptic, but just like, it's kind of that little comment.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but I had already picked surrender as my word of the year. And so I chose to buy the books this person was suggesting, and all of a sudden it was like, whoa, I'm in Mary Magdalene energy. And here's the thing that's so interesting about surrender is I believe that a lot of this is already set up for us in our lives, that we came to do specific things. And for me, if I go back now, to where my journey with Mary Magdalene started, I didn't know at that point of time that that's what I came to actually jump into. But there's very much a timeline along where little bits and pieces were brought into my conscious awareness. And it wasn't like, when she said that, it was like, I had no dream of doing Mary Magdalene pilgrimages. It was like not on my list, not on my radar. And yet within that short period of time when I said yes and surrendered to, okay, this is like really pushing me out of my comfort zone. Then it was like everything aligned and you came forward into that equation. So what was that like for you? Is that similar? Like, what are you feeling in terms of how did we end up being on this incredible mission?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, my whole life for the last 12 years has been surrender, since I had my catharsis where I fell apart. But I remember the moment of surrender. And as soon as I allowed myself to release everything, grief and whatever it was that was coming, in that moment of surrender, so much opened up. So I know that the process of letting go and surrendering to possibility, it's not so much about what you're letting go, it's about what comes of it. So for me, I remember the beginning of this year, New Year's Eve, I was watching a movie which took place in France, and in 2015 I'd walked a pilgrimage in France, and every day was full of so much joy, and I felt this connection, deep connection to the land and to the divine feminine energy. It's just so beautiful. And so December 31st, 2017, as the year turned, I was watching this movie that took place in France. Next thing you know, I was bawling all that night, bawling the next day, and I was like, I gotta go to France. I've got to do pilgrimages in France. And I think it was almost immediately that I said, I know exactly who to contact, and that's Ariana. And next thing you know, here we are. And I think there have been so many synchronicities along the way since we started, leaning into this energy, that there's no question it's the right thing for us. And, well, for me, I should say, I can't say for you, but I think it's, we're both still here, so it must be all right. Yeah.
Well, I think it has been this amazing journey in the sense of I mean, really diving into the logistics of creating a tour for 12 amazing people with buses and finding accommodation and finding all the right places and dancing the dance of, paying for things ahead of time and then trusting that the universe is going to bring in the people that are supposed to be here. And just that's a different dance. And it requires courage beyond, it's really in that total trust of the divine. And it's,
Yeah.
really when the sense of, sometimes it can get scary within that. We're called to do something, and then it's like, how is this going to work? This is the logical mind wants to figure everything out. And I'm a recovering computer programmer, so for sure, my mind definitely goes to, okay, this and this and this, and this is how much money we have to put up front, and this is how much money, this is how many people, the whole organizing and everything. So there's one thing to surrender, but it's not about letting go of the logistical pieces that have to be done. Because we could surrender and then go to the beach and say, okay, we'll meet in September and everybody's going to
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there's this really fine line, I think, that I struggle with, in the sense of allowing, knowing that I have a deep spiritual sense of really knowing I'm on the right, that this is right. It's got so much energy that's been coming through. And I'm not actually the person that feels a lot of energy normally. So when I get these big waves of energy coming down, I know I'm on the right track. That doesn't mean it isn't scary. It doesn't mean it isn't out. It's totally out of there's aspects that I'm good at that are easy to slip into because it's my doingness. I know how to create files and web pages and things like that. But it's really, and it is necessary to do those things. But there's the scarier part is actually not that. It's really like putting it out there and just being seen in a far more, I think, authentic way. And when I say that, I haven't consciously been inauthentic. So we have these masks, so you and I have talked about this before, of our personas that we showed up with on the planet. And I think that, we have the persona for family, the persona for work, the persona for friendships, all these different personas. But within all of that, my persona has been mostly in fairly non-challenging, in the sense of like just bringing in that Paley energy of, whoosh, we have to change things on the planet. Now I'm feeling that emotion. It's just like this fierceness that nobody would mostly call me fierce. Like just those personas that have been present, I would be willing to bet that there's pretty much not, I won't say not anyone, but I would be pretty safe to venture a guess that most people wouldn't put that adjective on me. How about for you?
Well, I find it really interesting that, we're talking about personas, and that's very much a part of belonging, right? And so the surrender is like allowing the need for personas to fall away so that you uncover that vulnerable truth of who you are, which then becomes the only thing that exists, right? And so then there's this sense of so the courage in that obviously is being vulnerable and stripping away. But I totally understand the need. Like for so long, I felt like I was splitting myself in two because I came from a sort of academic background, and then I channel these messages from the earth and from trees in the universe, and I speak to animals, and it's like, well, how the hell do those two fit together? I don't know. So I would keep it totally separate. Like my business stuff never touched my, personal Facebook page. And then my business Facebook page was all just like this persona. And I'm starting to realize like it's really key to mesh the two together. And that some of that stuff we've been taught about, here's how to show up as a professional, or here's how to, what needs to be for things to be right, that's all part of that patriarchal understanding of of shutting out the feminine. So, I mean, the feminine is showing up in that authenticity and making mistakes and saying, oops, I screwed up and whatever. And, like all of that stuff, it's just totally letting all that stuff fall away. I think I forgot the question. I'm sorry.
That's okay, because I think that's actually what we're bringing more in, is being in the flow. And I have a brain that tends to be like that. It's just like, I think there was a question somewhere that I was
talking about. Yeah.
And for most times, I think that, why do we have these personas in the first place? Because there's a fear, if I really showed up in the truth of who I am, who I think, the thoughts that go through my mind sometimes when I'm witnessing and I'm in the conversation, and it's like, no, it's not okay to say thoughts. So the persona gets created from the sense of, what are the consequences of me saying that thought? And then it's underneath that is, why do we even fear those consequences? And it comes back again to when we're thinking about clearing the energy and the divine feminine, of the amount of times where there were consequences of death.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we're carrying that energy through the lines. So I think I'm getting that big shiver again on that one, because it's really, it's time to take the mask off, and it's time to just trust that we're not going to be burnt at the stake, and we're not going to be drowned, and we're not going to be. Now, that doesn't mean that women haven't danced that dance in their families, in current lives, so we can have the long ago energy that we're all holding as a feminine line, but also it's the current lines, like, where am I? Am I safe as a child? Where do I define and dance and start to protect everything? Because I start learning really, really young in life that it's good that they don't necessarily know what I'm really thinking.
Right.
Or I need to be this dutiful, kind of daughter or whatever within the family, in order to be in dealing with my perception. Because again, it's our perception, dealing with my own perception about how safe I feel.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And this is the tricky part, is the idea that, funny that family and familiar are like the same root, but what is familiar to us sometimes feels safe, even when it's the least safe option, but it's only because it's so familiar that it has that, there's a certain comfort to it. So this is where the courage comes in, to say, like, these familiar patterns, even the familiarity of the collective ideas and structures. Like, when you feel yourself nudging up against the edges of those and going, hey, this is just not working, then that's where you have the courage to step beyond it and say, let's create something new. And I think that's what this feminine energy is calling us to, is like, together we are creating the new template. And it's really valuable that we have, that we come together in groups and have these conversations, because everyone feels fear. Like, this is, Ariana will tell you just before the session today, I was suddenly all nervous and like, oh my God, but it's that idea of, what if I can't tap into spirit? What if I don't know what to say? And but this is, again, it's part of that, the old structures of, you're not supposed to show up unless you have it all figured out and you've got the script and you've got that. But I think that's what we're changing.
Oh, big time. And I think, well, even today we had a plan, right? And our plan, this is a webinar. And then we were 10 after 12 and whatever the time start was. And it was like, it doesn't look like we're doing a webinar today. What are we going to do instead? But at that moment, we have a choice. We can give up.
Yeah.
We can restructure. we can wait a little longer, but really we have to make there's a decision point that happens, and it has to be made fairly quickly, because the energy has already been set for this meeting. So here it is. We thought it was supposed to look like us holding space and all the participants sort of sharing little bits about where they've been courageous, where they're not courageous, what's coming up for them. And then there'd be this beautiful circle of women coming together and having conversation, which is what my vision was. And then the clock kind of goes at 5 after, and I'm looking at Jenny and thinking, oh, this is interesting. And so I think this is really awesome, perfect, actually, in the sense of what's manifesting. Because it's like, what does courage look like in that situation where we've been vulnerable and put something out to the world, and our perception is perhaps that it isn't going to work, or we'll make a judgment about the situation, whether it's this or another situation. There's a judgment that's made, and then our opportunity of surrender is to say, your plan and God's plan are not the same. And so, we talked about that in the series of interviews we did before, but really the truth of it is that is usually what happens, because so my vision of it is that Spirit has the full blueprint and all the roadmap and everything. And we're muddling under, like looking at the bottom of the tapestry to say, all I can see is these knots and strings, and I don't know where things are going, and I'm just going to turn left over here. And Spirit's saying, no, go to the right. And we were, it's really this recreation in the moment. And I love this conversation, actually. And I'm feeling that it actually could serve at a higher level than what we had originally planned.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole point, is that, like, surrender isn't a destination. Surrender is a state. It's like a feeling of presence and openness, I guess, at the same time. There's more, but it's almost hard to articulate. But if you think of it as a state, like, oh gosh, I need to surrender right now, then you're actually resisting surrender, because surrender isn't something to get to. Surrender it's like almost an essence, I guess. So it's like that sense of approaching everything from a state of surrender means that whatever shows up is exactly right, even if nothing shows up, because then you're so open that that's where the opportunities come from, right? And so surrender means that there aren't the judgments and expectations and linear, rational timeline of what should happen or what might happen or what could happen or what you'd want to happen. It's just, hey, here's the inspiration to start this thing, let's do it, and then see what happens. And I know that from that perspective of the old, like the sort of distorted masculine sense, that seems very airy-fairy or flighty, or it might seem flaky, but it's not. It's actually it's a very, very present state, and when you're so present with yourself and the energy and the possibilities that exist, magic happens in those moments, right? Like, that's where the greatest manifestations and magic happen.
I totally agree. And it's really that whole feminine flow, right? And it's just like, just having something held loosely and still holding on to, so that when the choice point came, it was, no, we're not going to waste this opportunity. We are going to explore exactly what we meant to do. It's going to look a little different than what we had originally forecast. And then courage can be just that place of going to plan B, even if you didn't have a plan B, because we didn't have a plan B because we hadn't anticipated that we needed one. But I think it's really when you hear the phrase sometimes, don't stop 3 feet from gold, or don't give up, or whatever. Sometimes that phrase is used in a very negative way, and it keeps people tied into bad relationships.
Oh, totally.
From making good business decisions that just say, because,
Mm-hmm.
well, I've invested all this, I can't give up, or I've got the kids, I can't, I've got this whole thing is I can't give up because I will be viewed as X, Y, or Z by society.
Right.
I will view myself as X, Y, or Z because of my own internal programming. But what the truth of that saying of don't give up needs a corollary statement that says, look where you need to adjust the path. Look where you need some adjustments in order to move forward. And, seriously, I call it, sometimes it's putting the happy face sticker on the red warning light. And I know I did that when I was in this business partnership where I lost my savings. I intuitively, there was a part of me that was feeling just antsy and not, something was going wrong. And again, I had a pattern in my life of bullies, and I had a person that was the head of the company who had that kind of an energy. And I remember just being in the dance of hiding in my office and pretending, even though I was the person who actually was doing what needed to be done to create the product we were selling. Like, I was designing this database for 2 years. And there was no reason for me to freaking tiptoe in that environment.
Right.
I didn't want to really look at the truth of it because I had invested all this time. And then if I quit then, so there's all these things that go in our mind that keep us from really making good decisions in our lives. And I think it's the ability to pivot, to go to a different direction.
Yeah.
Before it becomes a crisis.
Yeah.
That is what's wakening up more and more with people, and just say, no, it's okay. It's okay. And in fact, the biggest failures, the biggest people who have been the biggest leaders have failed tremendously in what most people would never be able to keep on doing. Even, the basketball players and baseball players. I think Babe Ruth or something struck out many, 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 many times, but he still had these incredible records, but he kept going because it didn't bother him that he was striking out. He didn't view that as being a bad thing, because there's people that would, the first time they, if they get strikeouts 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, they're gone. Like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not supposed to be a baseball player. I'm not supposed to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fascinating to see. Like, I think the interesting thing about surrender is, like, it's the intention and the willingness behind it, right? Like you have to be at the point where you're ready to give up everything. And the thing is, you may not be asked to give up everything, but if you're at that point, then it's like you drop your attachments to not just the things, but the expectation of what it could be. And once you've dropped your attachments, it can become more. And I know that several times over the years, I started my blog in 2013, I think, on my website. And I think 3 times I've said, I felt like I'd come to the end of it. So I stepped back from it for at least a month. And then suddenly it just shifted. The energy just needed to shift. But I was willing to give it all up. And so when you're willing to give it all up, it's like you just make space for the new to come in. And I think that's really the key with surrender. And people fear it so much because of the attachments we form. We form attachments to things, to people, to concepts, even to the structures which are hurting us, these distorted structures of this world that we live in. We have these strange attachments to them because, again, it comes back to that idea of the familiar being safe. Because it's all we know, it's all we've ever known as a collective or as individuals. And then when individuals have the courage to step beyond the limitations, other people start to go, wait a second, we were told that wasn't possible. But they're going, sure it is. I just stopped believing it wasn't possible. So it's like surrendering the collective limitations and understanding that there's so much beyond what we could possibly see or know with our physical senses.
It's very true. And I think, I think we're close to winding up, but one of the things that came to mind as you were closing is that both of us have actually been homeless for 5 years and house sitting in order to do things. And it's, there's people that look at that as being tremendously courageous. But really it is adapting to what is in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
The courage becomes in adapting.
Yeah.
The courage is not sort of giving up and going finding a shack somewhere where minimal requirement is there. But I know I'm not on the planet to be sitting, playing dead. I've gone to the bottom of resources and been forced, actually. And I think that's one of the things that Spirit keeps tapping on our, giving us a little tap and giving it a little tap. And we can be so in our mind, or we can be so in our process or in our environment or in our everyday life that we just tend to say, oh no, later.
So damn stubborn. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get the whap across the head and you're eating sand and it's like, okay, all right, I get it. I'll go do this. And it isn't really done from that place at that point. It's like Spirit saying, you agreed to come on the planet to do something, to be something different than what you were. You're not wanting to let go. It's the security blanket.
Yeah, exactly.
Of where we're in our lives, right? It's that security blanket that it's the whole thing of the golden handcuffs where people can't quit their jobs. And just all you who are watching, don't go quit your job today. I mean, ideally you do have sort of somewhat of a plan to shift from where you are to where you're being called to be. That doesn't mean you have to throw out everything and then start over. I did it the hard way. And I think Jenny is, it's interesting that our resonance is very much in that same general period. And there's a point within that where it's like, okay, I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
I need to step forward in a bigger way. And I'm tired of moving my stuff from locker to locker, or in your case, from one place to another. And I think there's a point where we come and experience things, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it gives us a great deal of insight. And then it's time for it to be done and for something else.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we forget about the feminine energy is that, like, when you say yes to a healing journey, there is no timeline. And the feminine energy is like this deep internal processing, and people may not see the difference on the outside, but you can feel the shifts within you, and it takes time. And the feminine knows that, like, it's got this innate patience, so it's only the outer world that's like, what, you're this old and you're still doing this, and like putting these timelines on things, and by this age you need to be doing this. No way, like, that is so part of the old structures. And we need to start to realize that as this feminine energy has been coming forward, and it's been a while, but I think a big upsurge started in the 60s. And so there were all those people that were the free love movement, all of that stuff was connected to the rising energy. But then it went underground for a while because it still wasn't safe, but it's really starting to come up again now. And so, that's how many decades ago now, not to mention millennia of this, but I mean, that's patience, like when it's ready, there'll be no stopping it, but it's been healing the whole time. So we have to remember that all of this stuff that goes on, if people outside of our, if other people in our lives or society is trying to tell you that what you're feeling is wrong, or the way you're going about something is wrong, or that you should be doing it a different way, or you need to have a plan, a 3-month plan, a 5-year plan, just, tell them nicely to piss off, because actually, like, the divine feminine has her own timing and is an incredibly patient, it's incredible. It really is. It's yeah. That's one thing I've really started to realize, because I started to notice recently. I keep, sometimes I go to that tendency to beat myself up. Why am I still house sitting after 5 years? But when I think about why I started and how I got into it and the state I was in when I got there, I have come so far, especially on that like internal healing level, that it doesn't matter that I'm kind of in the same place, because I'm not. I am so far ahead. And so that's again that sort of circular cyclical spiral, of the labyrinth of the feminine that is so key. So sorry, I can stop now.
Okay, well, I'm going to start to wrap up and sort of summarize a little bit. And so, wow, what an incredible, I love this conversation. And I actually love being in this back and forth, having fun, communicating, and having ideas pop in and out. And that's what our whole process of building the Mary Magdalene pilgrimages has been for the last 6 months. It's been this many parts logistical, but many parts, all these conversations about, life and what's happening on the planet and our own feelings and whatever's triggering for us in each particular moment. And that's one of the things I'm so looking forward to when we're on the pilgrimage. So we're actually 11 days, we're leaving from Paris to go down to Chartres and walk the labyrinth. And then we're moving down to where Mary Magdalene actually spent her last days, and then across to all the places in the south of France. Not all the places, but a lot of the places in the south of France where she spent time and where her energy is very, very strong. In Provence is like, she is the hero there. It's just like she is so revered. And what I'm looking forward to is the last 6 days. Well, I'm looking forward to it all, but the last 6 days where we have this big, beautiful domain, the Castello, and we are in the whole place with these beautiful organic meals, but we're in circle. And it's like we have this time sort of building up the energy to get to that. And we're still going out each day on this beautiful air-conditioned bus and going to these, Carcassonne and Béziers and Luxembourg and different places that have such historical significance in that journey that she carried. So the whole thought of being able to have these conversations with women that have started building up the energy, and then just coming into circle and having this discussion at a deep level and doing the clearing work and doing the healing work on the planet. Yeah. When we're visiting some of these places, there's a lot of energy from some of the things that were done that we're going to be healing as part of the group. And so what's your sense in that, in terms of the excitement about what's coming forward?
Well, I'm excited to do it all in person too, because something people might not know is Ariana and I have never met in person. Like, we've only met online, and we've met a lot through Zoom. So it's kind of exciting. We get to meet for the first time when we arrive in Paris. But also to meet all these other people in person, like all these wonderful women that are coming together on this pilgrimage to really, because Zoom is incredible. And I can feel the energy through Zoom anyway, but when you're sitting in person in a circle, there is just something so powerful about that. And of course, to be in France again, like France itself just has this amazing, beautiful energy all through it, that I think is very healing. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to post this on our Mary Magdalene Pilgrimage YouTube channel. So actually, if you see me saying this, you already know that because you're there watching. But I encourage you, if you're on the channel, to look for other interviews, and we'll be posting on a regular basis, and we'll be blogging on the Mary Magdalene Pilgrimage's place online. So hope to see you in one of those places, and looking forward to our next Mary Magdalene Sessions. Topic to be determined, and to be determined.
Yeah.
So thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.